And our next speaker is Emily Cohen. She's the owner of Tandem Speech Therapy in Austin, Texas, a small boutique private practice that provides in-home therapy. She's also the author of the book Playing with Purpose. Emily specializes in teaching parents to use play with their young children to build speech and language skills. I'm a huge believer in the importance of play and teaching this to families, and I can't wait to hear what Emily has to say about tips for helping parents start playing with purpose. Go for it, Emily.
Hey, thanks, Kyla. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. And, oops, sorry, something's in my way. Okay. So yeah, thank you all so much for having me today. As Kyla mentioned, I own a private practice in Austin, Texas, and I've been an SLP for 11 years and previously a special education teacher, so I have lots of experience interacting with parents. And when I did my Hannon It Takes Two to Talk certification like 7 years ago, it really sparked my interest in play and language development. And that's what led me to create my framework called Playing with Purpose. This is the book. It looks like this. And it's what we kind of do naturally as SLPs when we're playing and interacting with kids and when we're doing therapy and teaching parents an early intervention. But often it's what we have to teach and train parents to do. I think as adults, play doesn't necessarily come naturally to us, and that's certainly true of the families and the clients that I interact with. So Playing with Purpose is just my way to talk to parents about how they can adjust their interactions and their everyday routines so that they can increase speech and language development for their kids. And so one of the first things that I talk about with parents in therapy is about choosing toys. And it's not just about the toys that we choose when we're interacting with kids with therapy, but there are also choices that parents can make when they're buying toys for the holidays or gifts for their kids. And so the very, very, very first thing that I talk to parents about is trying to reduce or eliminate toys that have batteries. So we know from research that when they've looked at MRIs and functional MRIs of kids when they're playing and interacting with toys that have batteries, the activity in the brain isn't happening when the toy is doing all the work. We want the child to do the work, not the toy. So even like that super popular Fisher-Price piggy bank with the coins that we put in, I use that in therapy all the time. Mine just doesn't have the batteries in it. And then I'm providing the language and the interaction for the child. So that's a super easy way that families can adjust what they're already doing. I also talk to parents all the time about going back to the basics, thinking about the toys that they played with as a child. Those are also open-ended toys. So open-ended toys are toys that don't have a beginning or an end. So think about things like blocks, a dollhouse, a farm, bubbles, things like that. The stuff that we naturally choose as therapists are the toys that we can help our families make the choices for their kids. Of course, I talk to parents all the time about getting outside. That might be a little bit more challenging these days, depending on where people live. I'm fortunate in my community that there's still lots of open space and we get to be outside, and I see families outside in their front lawns playing with kids. So those are perfect opportunities for language stimulation for families. I also talk to parents often about reducing the amount of toys they have in their house. I think one of our other presenters who's presenting later, Carrie Ebert, shared something this week, and she made the suggestion, which I think is fantastic, about each morning a family can set out just 3 toys for the child to play with. And I often suggest this to families in early intervention sessions. This works and helps kids sort of increase their attention so they're not bouncing from activity to activity. If we're really looking at providing language stimulation, it gives us lots of opportunity for that and for a child to stay with an interaction longer, which is what we want. So the fewer toys that a child has at any one time is really going to increase our language opportunities. And I think the last tip that I want to encourage us to remind parents about is that we have to think outside of the box sometimes, right? Like think about that Amazon box that you get. Maybe we're not getting as many of them these days, but how many times have you bought a gift for your own child or your grandchild and they have been more interested in playing with that box than the actual toy that it came in? So things like a paper towel roll or plastic cups, all those things that are maybe not traditional toys can be toys and can be ways for us to interact with kids. So we know that communication begins with interaction, and we have to have that interaction from a child in order to establish communication. The purpose of communication is clearly social, and so the first step in helping our kids and their families learn to communicate better is to establish that back and forth exchange. So we often call that reciprocal communication. There's a fantastic video that the Harvard School of Education has put out that's called Serve and Return. That's what they refer to it as, and it's really, really parent friendly, and I often ask families to watch that just to explain how important that back and forth exchange is. And so we know that response and the attention and all of that lots of back and forth is what really builds the foundation for kids. It's just the foundation of everything, and it's the foundation of all interaction. And if we don't have that foundation, then we're not going to be able to support a child's language as well. And that can be really challenging. So we know that some of the most important pre-language skills and foundations for building communication are eye contact and joint attention, right? Eye contact is one of the earliest means of communication that we see. I talk to parents all the time about remembering when their child was a newborn and they were sitting and feeding that child, and the eye contact that that child makes. Eye contact is a way to for kids to give us communicative intent, and for us to give them attention and to provide value to the communication that they're sharing with us. And joint attention is just as important. You know, it's how we really begin to share an experience. And we see that often in kids. The example I like to give to families is you're sitting on the floor with your child, they're playing with their blocks, and they pause and they look up at you, and it's just kind of our way of checking in with each other, like saying, hey, you're there, you're important, even though I'm really loving playing with this toy, like I want you to be part of that interaction. And so those are two important things that sometimes we have to have kids build before we can begin to, help them with verbal communication or an alternative form of communication if verbal communication isn't going to be their means of sharing with the world. So we all know how to increase eye contact with our kids, but these are some of the tips that I share with families. We know that sitting face to face is really important. One of my favorite ways that I tell families to help kids increase eye contact and joint attention is to sit in front of a mirror, often on the floor. A lot of people have like a full length, like think about the full length mirror in your house for maybe getting dressed in the morning, and sit on the floor with their child in their lap looking at the mirror, and they can play funny face games. And that's just a really fun and engaging way. We have to make communication fun for children sometimes. If it's not intrinsically motivating for them at that stage, kids love to look at themselves, and they love to look at the people that they care about. So that's a really fun activity that families can do with their kids. And again, joint attention, super important. I do lots of, this is a little bit more challenging these days, because we're doing telepractice, but these are all things that we can do and teach families how to do, even if we're using telepractice. So I'm working with an intern this semester, and I'm encouraging her, and we're taking our laptop and sitting on the floor and encouraging the family to take their computer or their tablet and sit on the floor and coach families in what they can do to increase eye contact, increase joint attention, and then that will lead to more communication skills. So, playing with purpose. Let's get started talking about that. So, again, the most important thing is to show caregivers how they can build their child's speech and language skills. So the way that I'm doing that now when I'm not going into families' homes is, again, I'm taking my laptop and I'm sitting on the floor in my office, and you can't see them behind me, but on the shelf behind me, I have a bunch of stuffed animals, and I am sitting on the floor, myself and my stuffed animal, face to face, and I'm modeling for families what they can do in an interaction. So one of the things that we're doing is kind of planning out in advance. So maybe I decide with a family that we're going to use a farm toy. I have a farm toy, they have a farm toy. So then I can model for them what I want them to do, and then I can observe them and give them feedback. And so we know that for parents, it's really important to get down on the floor and be face to face. It's a way that we can connect more easily with a child. We can also hear and see their messages. So much of communication is nonverbal, and we want to reward that nonverbal communication just as much as we want to reward the verbal communication if that is the level that the child is communicating at that time. And when we are engaged face to face, we can really encourage children to take the lead. We know how important child-led play is, and we want to encourage children to take the lead in their communication, so then when they take the lead and we're observing and noticing what they're doing, we can respond, and it sets up that back and forth exchange, which is so important. We, of course, know the importance of waiting, and sometimes we have to model that for parents. I like to talk about waiting with us as therapists because it's often a reminder I have to give to myself. When I had mentioned before that I was a special education teacher prior to being a speech language pathologist, and I taught for a year in a self-contained classroom for students with autism spectrum disorder, and we had signs all over the classroom that said wait 15, right? Because we know that we have to give children an opportunity to respond to our communication, and for a lot of kids that means more than the immediate response we might get from one of our peers or another adult. And so there are some ways that we can do that. And again, I just model that for parents, or I encourage them to slow down, pause, wait. I usually tell parents just to count to 5 in their head when I'm working with my clients who have kids that are language delayed. And sometimes I encourage parents to just take a moment to do that on their own and really think about and feel what that 5-second waiting is like, so that when they're playing with their child and they're being intentional, when they're playing purposefully, that they can do that on their own. Again, it's just really important to give kids that extra time to process information. It's so, so important for our kids that are language delayed. And what we're doing when we're waiting is that we are giving the child enough time to understand that we're looking for them to do something. That could be responding with a word. That could be responding with some kind of eye gaze. That could be responding with some kind of gesture. That could be responding with their augmentative and alternative communication device, whatever that might be. But we want them to know that when we are waiting, we're waiting and we're looking for them to do something. We're waiting for them to communicate with us. So these are some of my favorite strategies that I teach to parents so that they can get started playing with purpose right away. These are lots of things we do naturally as therapists, but I think it's important to refresh our memories. So the very first strategy that I teach parents is about offering choices. So we want kids to be empowered to communicate with us, and when we make all the decisions, they are not empowered to do that. So we have to build choice in. It also gives kids, especially kids that are first word users, it gives them some vocabulary when they might not have the words themselves. So we always want to pair that verbal communication with some kind of visual. So I encourage parents to have the 2 toys that they are giving their child a choice between, or if it's at snack or mealtime, that they have the 2 items, the banana or the crackers. Do you want the banana or the crackers? And we also want to kind of, especially for our first word users, we want to use kind of as few words as possible to encourage them. And often when we give kids words, we're more likely to hear the words when it's their turn to talk. Another favorite activity that I like to encourage parents to do is to think about things that they enjoy doing with their child that the child couldn't do on their own. So you'll see in this picture here a wind-up toy. So wind-up toys are perfect. Often kids don't have the fine motor control yet, especially our littlest ones in early intervention, but those toys are super fun. And it's also really great because often if you wind it just a little bit, the toy will respond and do whatever it's going to do, but for a short period of time. So in just a minute or two, we can get lots of repetitions of providing an opportunity for the child to communicate, them communicating however they might be. If they say on, if they say more, maybe they're using a sign like more or on. Maybe they're using a picture exchange system to communicate that. But in just a couple of minutes, there are tons of opportunities to do that same thing repetitively. And we know that the more that we provide kids with vocabulary repetitively and give them opportunities to use that vocabulary or their communication in repetition, the more likely we are to see them doing it independently. And that's, of course, our ultimate goal. So wind-up toys are great. Bubbles are great. Kids love bubbles. There's lots of communication opportunity in it. But often bubbles are really challenging for kids to blow on their own. Like one of my favorite things to do in therapy with kids is, even though I love the no spill bubble bottles, is to bring a regular bubble bottle that has a lid, because again, it can be really challenging for a child to open on their own. And so I'll take that bottle out of my therapy bag and set it in front of the child, and that gives them an opportunity to ask in whatever way they are going to have the bottle opened or for you to blow or whatever it might be. So again, these are strategies that I like to teach parents because they're often things that I can teach really quickly, and then we have lots of opportunity in a session for them to try, and then I can model it for them and give them feedback. Another strategy that I love to talk to parents about is putting toys in clear containers. We do this, of course, as therapists a lot. It's the way I stay organized and the way I see many of my colleagues stay organized in our therapy rooms or in your therapy closet. And I think I might be out of time because I was talking too much. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Am I out of time, Kyla?
You've got one more minute if you want to wrap up with anything.
So what I just encourage everybody to do is think about the strategies that you use to elicit speech and language from your clients, and think about how you can distill that down and make it easy and teachable for parents. And I have tons of suggestions for that on my website and in my book. So if you need some guidance about how to talk to parents, you can find it there.
And can you just share the website with everyone?
Yeah, so it's just tandemspeechtherapy.com, and I'll go ahead and put it in the chat so y'all can see.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you.